The first time I walked into a white farmhouse on Township Road 362 outside Mount Hope, Ohio, in the middle of August, I expected noise. I expected the hard metallic hum of window units. I expected the attic above me to feel like a griddle. What I found instead changed something in me. The porch boards were hot enough to sting through thin soles. The kitchen air was cool enough to slow my breathing. I smelled pine resin, soap, dried herbs, and yeast bread. I heard a wall clock. I heard flies at the screen. I heard wagon tires outside on gravel. I did not hear a compressor. I walked room to room, slowly. I put my hand near every window. I looked behind a curtain. I checked the pantry. I stood in the downstairs hall for 11 minutes, looking for the sound I had trained myself to expect from every modern house in summer. It wasn't there, and that's when I understood I had been wrong about everything. I had been taught to think cooling was a machine. I had been taught to think comfort arrived on a truck, inside a box, with copper lines, refrigerant, financing terms, and a service contract. Standing in that house, with the attic heat moving above me and the lower air staying calm, I realized comfort can be built into the structure long before a compressor ever shows up. The realization did not come as a headline. It came as a feeling in my skin. The upstairs never turned savage. The hallway never trapped heat. The ceiling never radiated that late afternoon punishment every suburban house knows. The house was not fighting the weather. It was redirecting it. Then I stepped outside with the owner, and the whole thing became obvious. The roof had a path for heat. The shaded side had a path for air. The attic was not sealed into stupidity. It was allowed to behave like an escape shaft. Hot air rose. Cool air replaced it. The building was doing what physics has always done. Quietly. I've been going back to Holmes County every summer for 3 years. I've walked through houses in Berlin, barns outside Strasbourg, and workshops near Millersburg, where the loudest mechanical sound was a hand plane. Every time, I find the same thing. A refusal to trap heat where it doesn't belong. A refusal to pay to fight a mistake that never had to be built. A refusal to forget what older builders already knew. And the more I looked, the stranger it became. Because once you see it, you see how deliberate the forgetting was. Attics used to breathe. Roofs used to vent with purpose. Upper spaces used to pull heat out of lower rooms instead of storing it like punishment until midnight. Then that knowledge vanished from normal conversation. Not from the earth, not from the weather, from the manual. So here is the promise. If you understand what heat wants and you give it one cheap path to leave, you stop cooling your house the expensive way. In some homes, the crucial piece is a $4 vent hood at the top of an attic exhaust stack. In other homes, it is the way that hood turns wind and buoyancy into movement. Either way, the principle is the same. And yes, this works even if your house was built 50 years ago, you live in a city, you've never done this before, and you don't have much land. Stay with me, because what I found in Holmes County uses the same physics the Persians used to keep desert air moving and ice from melting more than 2,400 years ago. Here is the part nobody explains clearly. Your house does not get hot because hot air is evil. Your house gets hot because radiant heat loads surfaces, trapped air stalls, and the attic becomes a battery. Once that attic stores enough heat, the ceiling below it starts feeding that heat back into the rooms where you live. Then the compressor spends the evening undoing what the roof already did by noon. The University of Florida's Florida Energy Extension Service laid the mechanism out plainly in fact sheet EES 78. Soil at about 10 feet deep stays close to the local average annual temperature. That makes the ground a heat sink in summer and a heat source in winter. Run air through that earth path, give hot indoor air an upper escape route, and the building starts pre-cooling itself before a machine ever turns on. Think of it like your own body. You cool yourself with gradients, Sweat leaves, heat leaves with it. Blood shifts, air moves across skin. Your house works the same way when you let it. The attic is the forehead, the shaded intake is the lung, the earth is the cold cloth. That same Florida document gave a number most people never hear. Conventional heating and cooling systems average a year-round coefficient of performance around 2.0. Underground air tunnel systems, when paired with the right airflow path, can reach a coefficient of performance as high as 10 to 12. That means 10 to 12 units of cooling effect for every 1 unit of fan input, versus about 2 for the conventional system. That is not a small improvement. That is a different category of thinking. It also gave a summer performance range. On a 90-degree day, those systems reduced intake air into the 80 to 83-degree range before it even reached the conditioned space. Then the attic exhaust path kept that tempered air from sitting beneath a superheated roof. The compressor model attacks the symptom. This attacks the pathway. Oak Ridge National Laboratory found another piece of the same puzzle in its 2010 analysis of attic radiant barriers. In monitored Florida homes, reducing attic heat transfer produced 9% cooling energy savings and 16% peak load reduction. Same lesson, different angle. Stop the attic from becoming a punishment chamber and the bill drops before the thermostat does anything heroic. The Department of Energy says whole house fans can move at least half a home's air volume through the attic and roof when outdoor air is cooler than indoor air. That guidance matters because it reveals the real bottleneck. The problem was never your house alone. The problem was the path. Heat needs an exit. Coolth needs a route. Your builder sold you a sealed box, then sold you a machine to survive the sealed box. That gap represents a massive market in equipment, replacement, refrigerant, maintenance, and emergency service every year. And that is why you have never heard of this. The first time I felt the Amish version working, I was in a house near Berlin, Ohio, on a day that reached 91 degrees by mid-afternoon. The stair rail was warm at the top and cool at the bottom. The hallway held no dead air. The attic gave off almost no roar of trapped heat. I heard no blower. I heard no condenser. I heard a canning jar lid click on a shelf. I asked a man named Eli what he changed when the weather broke hard in summer. He tapped the wall, then pointed upward. He told me, "You let the hot go first." That was it. No performance speech, no brochure, no thermostat mythology. He said his father did it, and his grandfather before him did it, and they had been building that way for 4 generations. He told me that part of the habit came from people who carried building knowledge from Canton Burn and the Palatinate into Pennsylvania and Ohio, then kept only what proved itself. Not what advertised well, what worked. The roof lines, cupolas, upper vents, cellar air, summer kitchens, and shaded intakes were not random old-timey charm. They were a complete language of heat control. That knowledge never disappeared. It was filed away. It was waiting. By 1924, the United States Department of Agriculture was already treating natural barn ventilation as settled engineering in Farmer's Bulletin No. 1393, Principles of Dairy Barn Ventilation. By the time most Americans were learning to trust the compressor, ridge flow, cupolas, and thermal lift were old news to people who still built by observation. Go back farther, and the pattern becomes impossible to ignore. In Yazd, Persian builders raised bad gears above the roof line and paired them with thick earthen structures and underground channels. Some Yakchal walls reached roughly 6 feet thick. The tower caught moving air. The mass absorbed heat. The earth stabilized the rest. No switch, no motor, no mercy for bad design. In Egypt, builders used Malkoff wind catchers to pull higher air downward into shaded rooms and courtyards. The principle was identical. Catch movement above, release heat below, control sunlight, protect mass. Let the building do the work first. In the American Southwest, native builders used adobe walls often 12 to 18 inches thick, small shaded openings, and orientation that reduced direct solar gain while preserving night flushing. Same planet, same sun, Same answer, different language. The Persians didn't read this in a textbook. They figured it out the way all real knowledge gets discovered, by paying attention to what the Earth was already doing. Every civilization that mastered extreme heat arrived at the same answer independently. The Amish never forgot. They carried it from the Palatinate to Pennsylvania 302 years ago and kept building it because it worked, and because they never needed anyone's permission to do what made sense. Now the part that should make you angry. The suppression did not begin with a secret meeting in a dark room. It began with a market. In 1922, Willis Carrier publicly debuted the centrifugal chiller at the Rivoli Theater in New York. He was not protecting an idea. He was protecting an installed equipment future. Every house that cooled itself through structure and airflow threatened thousands of dollars in present and future hardware sales. Then the mechanism arrived. In 1923, the American Society of Heating and Ventilating Engineers published Determination of the Comfort Zone by A.P. Gaga's predecessors, C.P. Yaglu and A.H. Houghton. Comfort became a narrow, managed indoor target. Once comfort was framed as a machine-held band, architecture stopped being the first line of defense. It became a container for machinery. The porch shrank, the transom vanished, the vented attic became decorative or sealed, the cupola turned into fake nostalgia. That was the trick. Not a dramatic ban, a professional rewrite, a new default. The Larkin administration building had already been designed around cooling equipment in 1906. By the late 1940s, home cooling units were selling in meaningful numbers. By the late 1960s, the Department of Energy's own history notes that most new homes had central air. Once subdivisions standardized that assumption, passive cooling stopped being ordinary wisdom and became eccentric trivia. The named allies were easy to spot. House Beautiful and the Shelter magazines sold the image of cooled modern life and took appliance advertising money to do it. The Federal Housing Administration helped finance standardized post-war houses at scale. Carrier, General Electric, and Frigidaire sold the machines that fit that new template. Media earned ad revenue. Government earned housing volume. Industry earned replacement cycles. An entire field of knowledge disappeared from architecture schools, building codes, and contractor habits. Not because it failed, because it wasn't profitable. And it never really stopped. The New Buildings Institute described the backlash to the 2021 International Energy Conservation Code as fierce and unprecedented after the code ended up at least 10% stronger. The National Association of Home Builders published a code adoption kit arguing simple paybacks of 48 years nationally and 90 years for its ventilation option. Meanwhile, Open Secrets reports that the Air Conditioning, Heating, and Refrigeration Institute spent $964,622 on lobbying in 2022 and $1,196,483 in 2025. Slower efficiency gains mean more equipment turnover. More equipment turnover means more sales. Nobody told you. Not your builder, not your contractor, not the man who sold you 12 years of monthly payments and a maintenance plan. The United States HVAC market was projected at $65.20 billion in 2025. Every passive alternative built is equipment that never gets sold, refilled, replaced, or financed. Now, if you already own a house and you're thinking this only applies to people with land, stay with me. Because this next part is specifically for you. You don't need to rip out your existing system. You need a yard, a drill, a weekend. Start with the side of your house that stays shaded longest, usually north or northeast. That is where you want your intake. Mark a point 24 to 30 inches above grade. Then drill a 6 5/8 inch opening through the rim area or a lower gable wall where you can seal cleanly. From that opening, dig a trench 32 to 40 feet long, 18 inches wide, and 5 to 6 feet deep. Deeper is better, but consistency matters more than heroics. Lay one smooth wall 6-inch HDPE or smooth wall 6-inch PVC line in that trench with a 2% slope back toward a condensate drain point. Natural Resources Canada recommends smooth tubing, not corrugated, with lengths of 30 to 40 meters for strong temperature change and at least 1.5 meters of cover to the top of the tube. For a retrofit, you are scaling the same logic down to what one household can actually build. At the yard end, set a simple intake box 12 inches square. Face it away from direct afternoon sun. Cover it with stainless insect mesh that costs $7 to $14, then add a removable muslin cotton pre-filter behind it. At the house end, bring that pipe into a low room, hallway, or stair hall where cool, dense air can spill and spread. If you need a short transition, use Schedule 40 PVC. Seal every joint with EPDM or butyl, not cheap duct tape. Now give the hot air somewhere obvious to go. In the attic, build a vertical exhaust chase from 8-inch pipe or framed duct rising 6 to 8 feet above the attic floor line and terminating through the roof or high gable. Paint the exterior section matte black or sheath it in dark metal so the sun strengthens the draft. Then cap it with a plain aluminum vent hood, the kind that costs $4 to $9. That tiny hood keeps rain out, lets wind skim past the opening, and helps the stack keep pulling. If your rafters are bare, staple low-E radiant foil beneath them, leaving an air gap. Oak Ridge National Laboratory showed why that matters. Less attic radiation means less punishment for the rooms below. A foil roll runs $28 to $44. A 50-foot run of 6-inch smooth HDPE or PVC usually lands between $72 and $118. Flashing sealant, mesh, foil, paint, and fittings typically add another $117 to $301. Materials land around $286 to $472 if you buy carefully. Smooth wall pipe is not optional. Corrugated drain tile causes standing condensate and mold. Before first use, fog or wipe the tube interior with 3% hydrogen peroxide or a borax solution, then let it dry fully. After that, you are maintaining cleanliness, not rescuing a bad choice. On a 95-degree day, when subsoil is sitting around 54 to 56 degrees, this setup can deliver intake air in the 80 to 83-degree range before it enters the house, while the attic stack keeps upper heat from lingering over your ceiling. In dry evening conditions, the indoor drop feels larger than the thermometer suggests, because the heat reservoir above you is finally draining. The planning takes 40 minutes. The sealing takes one Saturday morning. The trenching takes a long weekend with help or 2 weekends alone. Maintenance is simple. Check the screen once a season. Wash the pre-filter once a year. Inspect the condensate point every spring. That is it. Your conventional system costs $7,200 to $14,800 to install, $118 to $247 per month to run in peak season, and lasts 12 to 18 years before it ends up in a landfill. This costs $286 to $472 total. It lasts 25 to 40 years. Your choice. Everything I've covered across this channel, root cellar cooling, gravity-fed water, lime wash wall care, I've put it all in one place. Step by step, season by season, room by room, in the order the families actually use it. It's called Product Name. Link is in the description. But stay here, because what Eli built is the part nobody is talking about yet. Here is the deeper reason this matters. Once you build even one thing this way, you stop seeing yourself as a customer first. You start seeing yourself as a steward of a structure. You stop asking which appliance solves the next problem. You start asking what the house, the yard, the shade line, and the attic already want to do. That is the shift they never wanted. Not because it failed, because dependence pays better than understanding. If you're the kind of person who believes that real knowledge has been quietly pushed aside to protect someone else's profit, you already know what to do. Hit subscribe. Not for me, for what comes next. Because this is not a channel. This is a quiet movement of people who have decided they're done being sold what they already own. I want to hear from you. Drop your state, your worst summer power bill, and whether your grandparents used attic vents, cupolas, or cellar air in the comments. I read every single one, and your answers decide what we cover next. Next week, I'm going to show you what a 1946 Penn State document reveals about keeping food cold without a compressor. The technique uses nothing but stone, shade, and moving water. And the report from 1946 that proves extension authorities knew about it 80 years before your kitchen showroom ever mentioned it. You're not going to want to miss that one.